Dads, guns, and kids. You know, for the anti-gun dads out there, and for the gun-owning dads out there, do this. Teach gun safety, no matter what. If you have guns in the house, or if you think guns should be illegal, teach your children firearm safety. There is nothing worse than reading a story about a kid shooting another kid, or shooting themselves. In every case I've come across, a kid finds a gun, curiosity is aroused, and handles the gun. Gun owners should be training their kids at a young age. Gun owners should be training their kids at a young age and more in depth. But at the very least, kids need to understand the seriousness of firearms. Now, don't pick up a gun unless dad or mom is there with you and we say it's okay. Now let's get real. They still might do this. Next lesson. Never, ever, ever point a gun at a person. Any part of a person. Unloaded, loaded. Never, ever, ever, ever have that barrel in the direction of a person, loaded or unloaded. Repeat that back to me. Treat every gun like it's loaded and ready to fire every time. If a kid wants to show you a gun, say no. If a kid shows you a gun anyway, run. Run away fast. Run away hard. Scream for a grown-up while running. Get away from that kid and get away from that gun. I'm a gun owner. I've got a bunch of them. I've got one right here. This is my wife's little baby subcompact. I swear my gun's a lot bigger. It's always chambered. Woo. Glad I made that one. It's always chambered. It's always ready to go. It's almost always on my hip. I have safes at home with guns. We have hunting guns. We have shotguns. We have obviously handguns. And even the boys have air rifles. They have air rifles, bow and arrow. They even have their own Youth 22. So we talk about guns, a little more frequently than obviously a non-gun owning family. But I've got a bunch of guns. My kids have use of, with dad, of course, their air rifle and a Youth 22. They will be less tempted by the taboo of a gun since they have seen, felt, smelt, heard, and fired guns. When I was a kid, we did not have guns at home. And I'm pretty sure my dad was anti-gun back then, but he has a range now in his backyard. Back then, we just didn't have guns in the house anywhere. We were not a gun family. But my stepmom had a handgun on display from her brother who served and died in combat. And it was a .365 Magnum. Whenever I could, I would sneak over, open that case, handle that gun, feel its weight, open and close the drum, because I had never held one. It fascinated me. Plus, it was wrong for me to do, and I was kind of a troublemaker. But I always wiped my fingerprints off, and I never got caught. There were no bullets anywhere, luckily. My mom's dad, my grandpa, trained me on firearms when I was 11 or 12, probably about a year or two after I started doing that with the Magnum. He taught me all about gun safety, parts, how they work. He let me fire them at the farm. I loved every second of it. But I understood the dangers much better. We had a scary moment at that same farm when Levi was 2 years old. My grandfather had his revolver in his belt holster. It was a Colt 45. And his belt holster hanging on his bedpost. And our 2-year-old Levi wandered in without a grown-up and saw it. He saw it. He stared at it. Ryan went looking for him, and she found him in the room staring at the gun. He looked at her and said, "Don't touch," and walked away. Now, Ryan's poor heart skipped a beat or 12. And, Grandpa put the gun up, of course, because having a 2-year-old wandering through his room just wasn't normal for him. But man, was I glad. Levi was A, a good listener, and B, we had trained him and showed him my gun so he knew not to touch. Now, I had done that just in case, before we had kids, I left a gun on the bedpost, on my little night dresser. We just left guns at ground level. We didn't have kids at our house. So I would just leave them. So my biggest fear was I was just going to do that again out of habit. I was going to put it somewhere low. And, when they're 6 months old or 2 months old, you don't have to, worry about that lesson as much because they're not even crawling. But once they start crawling and they can climb up and, they can walk, you have to go a little higher and higher or use a safe. And so we had trained him just in case I made a mistake and I left it in a drawer low or on a bed or, what do you call those things? What the heck do you call those little dresser, a nightstand? That was my concern. But man, I never imagined a scenario where we're at the farm and there was just a low-hanging gun from somebody else, and I never left my guns low that I know of, that I can remember at least. But I'm so glad we had driven those lessons into Levi just in case that scenario happened, and it did. Gun-owning dads have a huge responsibility of keeping their firearms secured and teaching and reteaching their kids about when they can and cannot handle a firearm. And of course, proper firearm safety. Even you anti-gun dads, it's still a wise move to teach your kid about firearms and the dangers they can pose. That way, if they find themselves in a scenario with access to a gun, they can make the right decision. Or if they get put in a situation where a kid wants to show off his uncle's gun, your child knows how to react. Now, I'm not going to turn this into an actual gun safety video, but please at least teach your kids the basics. Thanks for listening and watching. Comment below. I am listening to those comments. Feel free to submit stories and thoughts to Townsend at townsendrussell.com. And of course, find us everywhere: Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Snapchat, Instagram, podcasts, and our website. I am Townsend Russell with 100% Dad and the Dad Group. We're preaching over here for dads to step up, be real men, and real leaders of their homes.